If I had known what waited in those woods, I never would be coming alone. Because the first week at that old cabin, a black SUV with no plates rolled up to my tree line and just watched me. No lights. No engine rev. Hoost, silenza, and eyes hidden behind tinted glass. And trust me, when a place meant to be your escape starts watching you back, something dark is coming. If you're listening, don't blink. And don't forget to subscribe, you'll want to stay for this. When I bought that forgotten cabin at the county auction, I thought I'd finally escaped the world I'd spent 20 years inside courtrooms. Liars, paperwork, deals whispered in hallways. Out here, the air felt clean in a way laws never did. Pine sap, cold lake wind, old wood, the smell of a life I'd been too busy to live. The cabin itself looked like a leftover memory someone tried to bury. Half-collapsed roof. A porch leaning like it had one bad day left. Vines gripping the rails like they wanted to pull the whole place under the dirt. But to me, it looked like a reset button nobody else noticed. I brought only the essentials: generator, tools, a beat-up folding bed, and enough canned chili to make a doctor faint. Nothing fancy. Just a promise to myself that I'd rebuild something honest with my own hands. The first few days were simple, most peaceful. Sun on my shoulders, roof rebuilt board by board, dust swept from floors that hadn't felt footsteps in a decade. I slept outside under the stars, like a man trying to remember who he used to be. By day 5, I had solar panels humming, cameras facing the drive, and walls strong enough to keep raccoons from treating me like a sleeping bag. For the first time in years, silence felt like medicine, not punishment. But peace never lasts long, not for men with pasts like mine. On the 7th morning, I was patching the last row of shingles when I heard gravel crunching, but not on my driveway. My driveway was still too overgrown for anything but a determined deer. This came from the narrow path near the tree line. I turned my head, and there it was, a black SUV. Tinted windows, no platus, engine barely breathing. Just watching me. I stood there on the ladder, hammer frozen midair. Do I yell? Wave? Wait, didn't matter, because the SUV slowly reversed silent, smooth, and disappeared back into the woods like a shadow with headlights. I tried telling myself it was harmless, a lost hunter, curious tourist. Anything normal? But the truth, my instincts, those old, scarred instincts I'd tried to retire, whispered, remember, tease, because shadows don't watch cabins by accident, and strangers don't idle in the woods without a reason. The next morning proved it. I opened the door before sunrise, and the air felt wrong. Still heavy, like the forest was waiting. Then I saw my gate, hanging from one hinge. Not broken from weather, broken from force. Splinters fresh. Bolts ripped clean out, wood fibers pointing outward like accusing fingers. And, right in the middle of the drive, a freshly planted wooden stake. A shiny sign hung from it. Brand new, private community area, not trespassing. Community. What community? I bought 3 isolated acres, with no HOA, no neighborhood, no rules, except what the county recognized. This sign was no accident. I recorded everything. Old habits die hard. Boot prints. TRE marks. The exact angle the stake was hammered into the earth. Whoever did this came from the backwoods, not the road. They knew the land well enough to avoid being seen. That chilled me more than the SUV ever did. Not fear. Awareness. That feeling when the woods go quiet and you know someone else is out there. I repaired the gate, added another camera, and kept working. But the sense of being watched tightened around the cabin like a noose. Something was coming. Something organized. Something that wasn't over a simple boundary. And 2 days later, when I discovered someone had climbed onto my roof and sabotaged my solar panels just enough to weaken me, not break anything, I realized. This wasn't curiosity. This was a test. And the people behind it weren't done with me yet. The morning after the sabotaged solar panel, the woods felt wrong, too quiet, too still, like even the wind was holding its breath. I'd retightened every bolt, reset every camera, checked every wire, yet that feeling stayed, crawling under my skin like a warning. Inside the cabin, 3 of my cameras were suddenly offline. One feed frozen at 3:18 a.m., the others dead, not disabled. Too clean for animals, too precise for chance. Someone had been close. Close enough to touch the door. A smear of mud on the frame proved it thin, deliberate, fresh. They hadn't broken in. They didn't need to. They wanted me to know how close they could get. That was the first real push. I spent the day reinforcing the cabin the way old instincts taught me, extra bracing on the door. Cameras angled toward blind spots, motion lights tucked into the porch rafters. I wasn't scared, not yet, but I could feel the pressure tightening. And the woods were watching. That afternoon, I found the tire marks. 2 sets, deep, fresh, cutting a clean path from the old logging trail straight toward my land. Not hiker tires, not locals. Off-road, wide tread. Professionals. The trees swayed with a soft breeze, but something in that movement felt observeth. If you've ever had someone stare at the back of your neck, you know the feeling. I turned slowly, expecting to catch a silhouette, a shadow, anything. Just the forest, pretending to be harmless. Inside, my phone flickered between 1 bar and none, then dead. A cold realization settled in my gut. Someone was jamming signal. Small device, battery-powered, hidden in the woods. Illegal, effective, and exactly the kind of tactic used by people who want control of the silence. The second push came that night. At first, it was a dog barked far away, faint. Then again, same pitch, same timing, 30 seconds. Exactly. A loop. A recording, placed somewhere deep in the trees. Then came a high, vibrating hum. Not loud, not painful, just irritating enough to crawl up my spine. It rattled the hinges, shook the walls lightly. 10 bunnies. Silence. Again. Then 3 knocks. Not on the door. On the wall, just outside the camera's blind spot. Measured. Calm. Intentional. I didn't move for a full minute. I didn't breathe. Finally, I slid toward the window and nudged the curtain just enough to see between the shadows. No thing. Hoose trees. Just darkness. Just someone very, very patient. I didn't step outside. Men with experience don't chase noises into the night. That's how you disappear forever. Instead, I locked the metal bar across the door, sat on the cot, and listened. The generator sputtered, then died. Timing too perfect to be coincidence. Whoever they were, they wanted to shrink my world into darkness. Exhaust me, break me down slowly. If you're here, listening this far, hit subscribe, because the next part of this story gets worse before it gets justice. I sat awake for hours, jotting everything down in a notebook. Times, sounds, patterns. Old habits from old jobs. Documentation saves lives when truth gets twisted. Somewhere in the silence, I felt the shift. The pressure campaign wasn't random. This wasn't trespassers, not curious neighbors, not prank kids. This was organized, incremental, calculated, and I knew down to my bones that the next push would be bolder. I didn't know how right I was, because the next morning, as sunlight bled through the trees, I heard footsteps, heavy ones, more than one pair. And they weren't sneaking. People who hide their footsteps come to spy. People who let you hear them come to claim something. 3 men emerged from the woods, walking in formation. Matching polo shirts, gold emblem, Clearwater Bay Security Patrol, a fake uniform with real arrogance. The man in front, barrel-chested, stone-jawed, spoke with the authority of a tyrant, not a neighbor. "You can't be here," he said. No greeting, no explanation, just a claim over land he didn't own. Behind him, 1 man recorded my cabin. The other made sure I saw the pistol on his hip. That was the 3rd push and the strongest so far. because when I showed him the county map, proving this land was mine, he grabbed the tablet out of my hand. Who's like that? As if I didn't exist. A tug-of-war lasted only a second before I tore it back. His response was quiet, low, venomous. You threatening me? No, I said. I'm telling you what happens next. Silence, thick as tar. 2 seconds from violence. Then finally he motioned his men away. This isn't over. He wasn't lying, because later that day, the signal died completely, and the real harassment campaign began. After Henry and his 2 goons walked off my property like they owned it, I didn't go back to work. Not immediately. Men like him leave behind a silence that isn't silence at all, it's pressure. It's a message without words. And the message was clear. They were testing how far they could go. Before I snapped, I pulled out my phone to call the sheriff, not because I expected a rescue, but because having something on record never hurts. But the screen didn't even flicker a signal. Not a bar, not a blip. Just dead gray. 2 days earlier, I had made calls from the porch. Now, nothing. I tried the hotspot router. The indicator glowed solid red. Not flashing, not erroring. Just dead. Someone had jammed the entire area. That was no coincidence. That was strategy. And Henry had already hinted at it. Careful, you don't end up needing help you can't call for. If you're still here, hit subscribe before things get darker, because what came next, no homeowner should ever face alone. That night, the harassment shifted from psychological to tactical. First came the recorded dog bark over and over. Same pitch. Same spacing. 30-second loops, played from somewhere deep in the forest, not loud enough to justify a complaint, loud enough to keep you awake. Next came a faint, high-frequency hum that buzzed through the cabin walls, vibrating the nails, the hinges, even the glass. Not painful, just maddening. Ten, silence. Ten thunk, thunk, thunk. 3 knocks. Not on the door. On te, while right outside the camera's blind spot. I froze. Not out of fear, out of calculation. Only rookies fling doors open. Only idiots run into the dark. I slid quietly toward the window, pulled the curtain just enough to see a crack of moonlit clearing. Not a breath. Not a shadow. Just the creeping knowledge that someone had been inches away. The generator sputtered once. Twice. Then died. Too perfect to be accidental. Whoever was out there wanted the world around me small and helpless. But I wasn't helpless. And I wasn't alone for long. At 2:40 a.m., my phone vibrated one camera alert. The newest camera, the only one they hadn't discovered yet. East side motion detected. I tapped the feed. 2 men. Dark clothes. Masks. Moving with the discipline of people who'd done this before. One checked my windows with a scanning device. The other knelt at the front steps with a tool meant for bypassing cheap locks. They weren't kids. They weren't pranksters. They were on assignment. I slid the shotgun off the counter and racked it once. The sound cracked through the cabin like breaking bone. I raised my voice. Another step, and this becomes a felony scene. Sheriff has the footage. Cameras are rolling. A lie partially, but a useful one. Both men froze. 10 broke, running in opposite directions, one bolting into the backwoods, the other disappearing behind the shed. I didn't chase. You don't chase predators at night, you track them when the sun's up. When I stepped outside, lights blazing, I found exactly what I needed. A crowbar. Still warm from the hand that dropped it, and a 2-way radio. When I picked it up, it crackled. Static. Then a voice. Hold. Pulling back. Wait for. Then silency. Private channel. Not police. Not civilian. Small mistake. Big clue. I documented everything: footprints, the angle of the shed door scratches, the radio frequency, the type of tool marks. By sunrise, I hadn't slept a second, but I wasn't alone anymore. A slow crunch of tires rolled into the clearing. A dusty silver Chevy. Colton. He stepped out, coffeeing and scanned the scene in 5 seconds. Like a detective with a photographic brain, he knelt, touched the tire tracks, nodded. Someone tall, military, tread. They were here after 2 a.m. I handed him the radio. Escalated. Jaw tightening. This isn't neighborhood nonsense, he said. This is coordinated. I didn't need convincing. Someone's pushing, I said quietly. Testing. Measuring my reactions. Colton nodded, and whoever is running this hasn't started the real game yet. He was right, because the next day the HOA didn't send thugs. They sent their queen. And she came smiling, carrying a pie. The morning after, the masked intruders came and ran like amateurs who'd underestimated the wrong man. The woods felt strangely calm. Not peaceable calm like a predator resting before its next strike. Colton drove into town that afternoon, digging for answers the way only a retired investigator with nothing left to lose. I stayed behind, patching the shed and keeping an eye on the tree line. The silence didn't fool me. It was too neat. Tu mi sure. Which is why, when I heard the sound of smooth tires crunching into my clearing expensive tires, not truck tires, I knew this was no coincidence. Trouble was changing shape again. A pearl-white Lexus glided into view, like it didn't belong anywhere near dust or pine needles. The door opened, and out stepped a woman who looked like she'd been photoshopped into reality. Platinum hair, pastel jacket, sunglasses worth more than my tools, heels sharp enough to stab the forest floor, and in her hands a perfect golden brown peach pie. She smiled wide, polished, weaponized. Mr. Sloan, she called, voice-dripping sugary charm. What a pleasure to finally meet you. Pleasure. I wiped my hands on my jeans and stepped forward slowly, every instinct sharpening. She continued, I'm Karen Shelda, president of the Clearwater Bay Homeowners Association. Of course she was. There's always a queen bee, and this one came wearing perfume strong enough to declare war. You're on private property, I said. She laughed, waving the words away, like she was shooing a fly. I'm just being neighborly. I brought something homemade. Homemade, she said. But when she lifted the pie just slightly, I saw a supermarket sticker stuck under the tin. $12.99. The woman hadn't baked anything except lies. I thought, she continued sweetly, we could discuss your transition into the community. I'm not part of your community, I said flatly. A flicker ran across her perfectly curated smile. Not a crack, just the smallest twitch. Then she reset it like she'd practiced that smile in a mirror for years. Well, she said, stepping closer, some of the older maps are confusing. Boundaries shift. These things happen, and we believe your land may actually fall within Clearwater Bay jurisdiction. No, I said. The county confirmed it. Twice. This land isn't in any Her jaw tightened. Barely. A queen who wasn't used to hearing no. Behind her sunglasses, I knew her eyes weren't smiling. They were calculating, measuring whether I was an easy problem to erase. She set the pie on my railing carefully, almost ceremoniously. More like she was planting a flag than offering a gift. We simply want harmony, she whispered, but I sincerely hope things don't escalate. Dairy it was. The threat wrapped in honey. The last polite knock before the hammer swings. She walked back to her Lexus like a woman who expected the world to clear a path for her. Before she got in, she lowered her glasses just enough for me to see her eyes sharp, cold, territorial. Then she was gone. I did not touch the pie. Grocery store pastry isn't a gift, it's a message. Colton returned a few hours later, looking like he'd sprinted through half the county. Dust on his boots, sweat on his collar, and a manila folder clutched tight in his hand. You need to see this, he said. Inside was a developer blueprint, a full-color rendering of a future resort. Lakefront tennis courts, conference center, and my land, circled in red. tracked depending acquisition. I looked up slowly. They need these 3 acres, Colton said. Yours is the last piece. My stomach tightened. That's why they're doing this, I said. Yep, he nodded. And Karen isn't acting alone. There's money behind her. Serious money. He flipped to the next page, a wiring record of $50,000 sent to the HOA infrastructure fund by an offshore shell company. A down payment, Colton said. They expected to get your land cheap. Quietly, they hadn't expected a fight. They hadn't expected me, and they sure as hell hadn't expected Colton, because once we dug deeper, we realized something bigger. The HOA wasn't just harassing me. They were executing a plan, and the ambush that was coming next, they intended it to be the last one. The deeper Colton dug, the darker it got. A fake HOA boundary. Rewrite a resort project worth $62 million. Offshore money. Hired muscle. Coordinated intimidation. All for my 3 acres. It wasn't personal. It was business dirty. Profitable business, and business was about to get violent. Colton stayed in town that day, chasing records, pulling threads, cornering clerks who didn't T12 talk. I stayed at the cabin, reinforcing windows and waiting for the woods to make their next move. The sun dipped behind the pines like it was afraid of what came next. And honestly, it should have been. The first warning wasn't sound. It was shadow. Just before midnight, I saw a shape moving at the far end of the clearing. Not fast, not curious. Slow. Intentional. 10 another. Thin. A tear. The woods weren't just alive, they were closing in. My phone buzzed. North perimeter motion detected. 10 camera feed obscured. Camera offline. Second camera offline. They were cutting blind spots. Professionals. I crouched low, weapon ready, and peeked through the curtain just as a black SUV rolled into view with headlights off. Same type as the one that watched me the first week. The doors opened. 3 men stepped out. 2 in black, hooded jackets. 1 in front, bigger, older, walking with the confidence of a man who thinks the world owes him obedience. Henry Lott came back like a plague you thought you cured. And this time he wasn't pretending to negotiate. 1 goon carried bolt cutters. The other held a pry bar. Henry, he brought nothing, because his weapon was his presence. I whispered into the radio Colton left with me. 3 incoming. Henry's leading. Colton's voice came back low, steady, almost cold. Copy. Don't engage unless forced. The men split up. 1 moved toward the shed. 1 traced the cabin walls, looking for wiring. Henry walked straight toward my door, slow, deliberate, claiming the space with every step. I stepped back, racked the shotgun once loud enough to crack through the dark, and shouted, "1 more step, and this becomes criminal trespass with intent." Henry didn't stop, didn't blink. Didn't. Got it. He stepped onto the first stair, leaned close to the door, and growled. "You should have left when you had the chance." I opened my mouth to answer, but another sound cut him off. Click. A hammer pulled back. Colton's voice followed. "Henry, step away from the door." Henry froze. Colton stood at the bottom of the steps, weapon drawn. Flashlight angled across Henry's chest in a bright white line. "You again," Henry muttered. "Yeah," Colton said. "Me again," Henry sneered. "What are you gonna do? Shoot?" "I don't have to," Colton said. "You're trespassing. Armed. Caught on camera." "Step back." Henry didn't step back. Lunged straight at Colton's gun. It happened fast, too fast for a man his age. But Colton trained, steady, moved faster. He turned sideways, grabbed Henry's jacket, and slammed him into the dirt. The two crashed like a dropped engine, elbows, fists, weight, and fury. Henry swung wild. Colton blocked, ducked, countered. I kicked the cabin door open and leveled the shotgun. and the two other intruders froze. Fear replaced arrogance. "Real quick, drop the tools," I said. "Bolt cutters?" Pry bar. Both hit the ground. Blue and red lights flickered through the trees finally. The deputies were close enough to matter. By the time they reached the clearing, two men stood with hands raised. One man, Henry Lott, was face down with Colton's knee in his spine, and I stood behind them with a shotgun resting steady. Henry snarled as the cuffs clicked shut. "This isn't over," he spat. I leaned in close enough for only him to hear. "You're right. It's just beginning." For the first time since this war started, Henry Lott looked afraid. But taking down Henry was just the opening move. The real monster, the one giving orders, the queen inside the HOA walls. She was waiting for us in court. Courtrooms have a certain sound. Hollow, tense, echoing like the room itself is judging you. But the courthouse that morning didn't sound like justice. It sounded like pressure. Reporters lined the hallway. Camera crews jockeyed for position. Locals held signs that read things like, "HOA law," "Cabin rights matter," "End community extortion." Colton and I took our seats at the plaintiff's table. He'd actually ironed his shirt for once, though that ugly black notebook still stuck out of his jacket like a scar. Then the doors opened, and the Queen of Clearwater Bay strutted in. Karen Seldon pearls, pastel suit, hair sprayed into an impenetrable helmet, sunglasses big enough to hide lies behind them. She smiled at the cameras like she was hosting a charity gala. But behind that polished smile, her jaw twitched. Henry Lott came next, now HOA polo this time, just handcuffs and a deputy on each side. Without his fake uniform, he looked smaller. "Mina Bayatin." Judge Rita Carver entered tall, stern, and famous for one thing. She despised manipulation. The charges were read out loud, one by one. Conspiracy, document falsification, unlawful surveillance, trespassing, incitement to commit criminal trespass, tampering with communications infrastructure. Each word cut deeper than the last. Karen's lips thinned. Henry looked at the floor. The prosecution started with the footage Colton and I recorded: night raids, masked intruders, the jamming, the threats. Each clip made the jury lean forward. Each detail made Karen's mask slip another millimeter. But the strike that shattered everything wasn't video. It was paperwork. Emails, projected on a screen big enough for the whole courthouse to read. Apply noise cycle. Desab stage presence event. He's cracking, give it time. A hush rolled across the room like a slow wave. Then came Sheriff Granger. He looked like a man carrying a boulder on his conscience. "I was told," he said quietly, "to stay out of it." That it was a boundary dispute. That the HOA had authority, advised by whom? The prosecutor asked. Granger hesitated. 10. Mrs. Sheldon. The room gasped. Karen's head snapped toward him, eyes burning behind the sunglasses she forgot to remove. "And what changed your stance?" The prosecutor continued. "Evidence," he said. Mr. Sloane's videos, Mr. Cooper's documentation. It became clear the HOA wasn't enforcing rules, they were orchestrating intimidation. Karen's mask cracked, but the moment that destroyed her completely. Henry Lott's testimony. He shuffled to the stand, shoulders heavy. Not defiant, not proud, just tirette. "My role," he said, staring straight at me, "was to push him off that land. Whatever way worked." Whispers filled the courtroom. "And who gave those orders?" the prosecutor asked. Henry swallowed. "Karen did." Cameras flashed. Karen's lawyer almost fell out of his seat. Henry's voice wavered as he continued. "She said the resort needed that parcel, told us to make the place unlivable. Noise, lights, night visits. Break something if needed, but don't get caught." He inhaled sharply. I recorded her call. The courtroom exploded. Karen leapt to her feet. "This is fake!" she screamed. "He's lying, he's a criminal, he's—" "Mrs. Sheldon," Judge Carver warned. Sit down. Karen didn't say espirel, ranting about conspiracies, integrity, property rights, sabotage, even accusing the court of corruption. Deputies had to physically guide her back. Then the audio played, Karen's voice. Cold. Directive. Unmistakable. Use any means short of murder. Get him off that land. Silence hit the room like a falling tree. Seguas dune. The verdict came fast. Karen Shelton, 14 years. Criminal conspiracy, document tampering, coordinated harassment, unlawful entry, HOA abuse of authority. Henry Lott II, 8 years, reduced for testifying. Trespass, harassment, attempted forced removal. The HOA dissolved entirely. Assets said, restitution fund created. When deputies escorted Karen outside, she looked small, not powerful. Not regal, just a woman whose kingdom had turned to dust. The cameras swarmed her. She didn't smile this time. After the trial, the woods finally exhaled. For the first time, the silence felt real-earned. Colton stayed a few days, helping rebuild the front gate and checking every last camera feed. Before A left, he handed me a USB drive. Everything's backed up, he said. Even the thermal footage. Keep it safe. You saved my land, I told him. He shook his head. You saved it. I just brought the notebook. He drove away down the gravel road. A small wave out the window, dust swirling behind him. That evening, I rebuilt the gate steel posts, motion floods reinforced chain. Then I hung a new sign. Not trespassing, HOA not recognized, property protected by law. And for the first time, it felt final. A week later, I found a handwritten letter under a stone by the porch from an elderly woman and original homeowner. Inside was a recipe for a real peach pie. Thank you, the note read, for breaking the fever. We can breathe again. I laughed for the first time in months. I pinned the recipe in the cupboard. And that night, as the sun melted behind the pines and the lake turned still as glass, I hung one more sign below the gate. Just for me. Just for closure. Smile. Karen, you're on camera. And finally, the cabin felt like home.